You will be isolated and it will feel lonely. You will experience real solitude. So one way or another, you're going to be separated from others, from things, and it won't be easy. It will not feel good, especially at first. When you first experience solitude, it will feel bad and very uncomfortable. But it will also be worth it because you're gonna come out the other side absolutely different. Ready for a different life, all set for your new upgraded life. And that would feel good. That will feel really good. But one way or another, you will have to experience solitude on this journey, on your journey. But how long you stay in that phase, how long you stay in that stage, is entirely in your hands. And I say in your hands because there are things you could do about it and how you feel about it, but it also won't be easy. Also, it won't be a piece of cake, but it's doable. So it is actually in your hands. It's up to you. But you have to experience solitude just like anyone on this journey. Anyone on this journey of self-exploration, of digging really deep within themselves and in life, on this journey of unlocking their potential, unlocking the infinity, will have to actually experience solitude one way or another. Did you ever wonder why is it that solitude or even suffering in general is a common theme for those who are on this journey? Like take Eckhart Tolle for example. He claims to have had a complete ego death, and the way it happened was that he was experiencing rough times for some time now, and one night he wakes up in the middle of the night absolutely terrified, completely anxious, in fear and confused, disoriented, and he doesn't know why, he doesn't understand what's going on. And so he rushes out of bed, and there's nothing that he could do about it. He could not lessen how intense the feelings were, and coping was even out of the question. It was beyond the point of coping. We all know that state where in which we're beyond coping, that no coping could solve anything or could make us feel better. And so he rushes out of bed and goes outside. He goes for a walk, and then he takes a seat on a bench in a park, and he starts observing, and he realizes that he's seeing everything differently. Everything seems different, everything feels different, and he's starting to feel a little bit more calm and calmer as time is going. Where just a moment ago he was experiencing extreme discomfort, now he's at a point of comfort, and it feels good. And he just suddenly out of nowhere felt as if his perspective is dissolving, is being completely transformed and changed. And that's when he had his ego death. And the rest of the story you probably know, or you're able to know. You've probably heard about. What I'm trying to say is that at many points in your life, you will have to experience solitude as one form of suffering that you will experience on your journey. And the reason suffering is necessary, just like it was for Eckhart Tolle and many others who are on this journey, especially solitude. Let's get suffering out of the equation now, because that's not the video for it. But solitude is how you best listen when you're alone, when you have no one, maybe even nothing. That's when you listen the best. That's when you open yourself the most. That's when you're willing to sit down and just receive and just let yourself be. In intense suffering, ego death could happen. At any level of suffering, it doesn't have to be intense, but at any level of suffering, the ego is very agitated. The ego, it feels like you're dissociated from the ego. It feels like when you're experiencing intense suffering, it feels that you're almost going to pop out. And actually, that's something Eckhart Tolle also said, I forgot to mention. He said that as he was sitting on this bench, he felt some sort of popping out, as if he's completely new, as if he had shed his skin. And so that was also part of it. But with intense suffering, with any level of suffering, you're gonna keep getting closer and closer to an ego death, which happens at extreme suffering, because the ego cannot take this discomfort. It cannot take suffering. It cannot take feeling bad. And so bit by bit, gradually, you'll keep dissociating. You will stop tending to it. You will stop awakening it. You will stop entertaining it, because now you're suffering and nothing matters. You don't care about anyone. You don't care about standards. You don't care about the society. You don't care about your family. You don't care about yourself. You don't care about anything. And the ego starts to sleep gradually until you pop out with intense suffering. But at any level of suffering, solitude is one of them. When it first happens, you experience some sort of dissociation. You quieten the ego down, because you're not feeling good. When the ego does not feel good, it does not want to be there. When the ego gets still and stiller, when you stop entertaining it more and more, you start entertaining your higher self. You start allowing space. You start opening some space for your higher self to get through to you, for the infinite, for source, for this pure conscious energy to flow through you. You start opening yourself up for that, and you allow it in. And that's when you can receive your hints, receive your guidance the most, when you have no distractions, when there's nothing means that much to you, because you can no longer cope. You cannot cope with that suffering. You cannot, cope with that solitude. You cannot make yourself feel better, and so you're stuck with that feeling of solitude and the loneliness and how bad it feels. Especially at first. I know you get used to it. I know you start making sense out of it, and it gets better. And I'll tell you how in just a moment, or when. But that's when your higher self, when the pure conscious energy we call source in this universe, starts being able to access you. And so you get to that point because the rest of your journey relies on this point of suffering, on this point of solitude, where you suck in, where you absorb the most amount of data or downloads you can at that point to prepare you for what's gonna come next. And so whether it's something that you have to let go of, whether it's something to learn, whether it's a different approach, whether it's a different perspective, whether it's something you have to adopt, it could be anything. But for that reason, it happens. And for that reason, it has to happen. Now, how long you stay there is entirely up to you, depending on how fast you allow this data to be downloaded. Depends on how much you open yourself up for the universe, for life to get through to you, for your higher self to guide you to your grand intention. Because you had awakened after years or months of being deep in thought, of pondering, of asking questions. You reached a point of awakening. Once you awaken, it's not going anywhere, and you need guidance because it's there. Your grand intention has been set, and you know where you're going. You know that you've been called, and you're gonna get there one way or another. But how? And the ego is not designed to figure out the how or the when or the what. You must open yourself for this pure conscious energy to flow right through you and conspire in your favor, for the universe to conspire in your favor. And now you're getting the assistance, you're getting the support, you're getting the guidance you need to get your grand intention. But the ego gets completely overwhelmed. And the duration you stay in this stage depends on how much you overwhelm the ego. Because the more you're gonna overwhelm it, and the more you try to use your ego to change, to figure, to realize, to feel better, the longer your journey is gonna remain. And so we, out of survival, the ego has a tendency to make every experience as easy as possible. Sometimes it's a good thing, but in this scenario, in this case, it's a bad thing. Because when the ego tries to make it as easy as possible, when you're feeling lonely, you're in solitude, you're isolated, how do I feel better about this? I cope. You drink your feelings away. You smoke your thoughts away. You indulge heavily. You spend the whole day on your phone or binge watching just to avoid yourself. And as you avoid this experience, as you avoid yourself, you are avoiding this experience of solitude as if it never happened. And when you are avoiding the experience, when you're coping with it and you're making yourself, you're forcing some hints of good feelings, you are actually rejecting what it was meant to offer you, what it was meant, how it was meant to guide you. You are rejecting all of that, and you keep rejecting, and coping feels good, and it will continue feeling good over and over, cycle after cycle, and you get yourself stuck in a loop. But then it comes a point where you can no longer cope, and that's the point where you will have to pop out, where you will have to experience. But when that point comes, it will have evolved. This suffering or this solitude will have evolved and evolved and evolved, and it had taken the most intense or extreme form it could take. And that's how you make it harder on yourself. That's how you prolong your journey, and that's how you enhance your suffering. But what it's trying to tell you after you had popped out, what I mean to say is that for you to change anything, you have to change something. For you to change anything in your external reality, you have to change something in your internal reality. And here is where the veil comes in. Here is where you have to go to get out of your comfort zone. Here is where you have to pop your bubble, and with it, whatever you were holding on, whatever you were attributing your value to, whatever you're deeply as an ego attached to. But I don't necessarily mean that you have to take a physical step towards something, that you have to put in all of that work, you have to work hard, and you have to, start doing all of that discipline. And of course you're gonna apply discipline, but it's in a different image. But that's not what I mean, is get out of your comfort zone and go, I don't know, do what, and do this, and suffer and struggle and sweat and cry and your way to that thing. What I mean is that your approach to life has to change. And that's what solitude leads to. That's why solitude is necessary. Something about your approach or your perspective or your way of, your attitude, your way of treating yourself and your life has to change. And you are only as good as all of those things, as how you approach life. So what I mean is that if you've been hating yourself, you stop hating yourself. If you feel bad for yourself because you're lonely, you need to let that go. If you are obsessed with control, that's one thing to let go of. That's another thing to let go of. Your perfectionism is another thing. All of those things, I'm talking about core personality traits, core attitudes, approaching life. Are you approaching life every day with with a mood, with being grumpy and a negative attitude, as if you have a toxic relationship with life, as if you are approaching someone who you've hated for a long time, someone who's been, bothering you for a long time. Because if you approach life that way, it's gonna be just that. It's gonna be that person who's bothering you, who's attacking you and arguing with you all the time. But once you change that attitude, once you change your approach to life, now things start to change. And that's why suffering or solitude in this example is necessary. That's what happens through your period of loneliness. That's where God gets through to you, and it guides you, and it tells you, you need to let go of this. It makes you face your deepest fears. Look within. That's holding you back. And if you listen, you will see it. If you listen, you will be guided. If you listen, you will know what to do. You will realize things will be revealed to you, and you're gonna get out faster. But if you cope and avoid and escape, you're gonna remain there longer until you learn all of those lessons, until you realize all of those realizations. You can realize them from one trial, or you can realize them, understand them, know them, listen to them after during 100 trials. It's entirely up to you. But something has to change. That core values, those core approaches, those core perspectives, something from the formula has to change on the side so it would equal a different outcome. And you do that through periods of unease, through periods of suffering, through solitude, for example. And then you're approaching life differently, because once you do this, it starts imprinting on everything else. Now you're able to take those external physical steps, because once you change internally, you will be guided. Your intuition, your subconscious even, is gonna lead you to doing different things externally, and then internally aligned with externally, and you are building that momentum towards your dream reality, towards that calling. So you don't have to focus on how do I get out of my comfort zone in physical terms, because that will come as a result of you getting out of your comfort zone internally, of you getting out of your emotional comfort zone, of your mental comfort zone, so on and so forth. So once you change internally, that's what you're being guided to. Your guidance is to change internally, is to work on yourself. And once you do that, once you discipline yourself in that regard, everything external is going to be just a result, is going to be the outcome of this process. You will do things differently, you will indulge in healthier things, you will no longer need to cope, you'll feel so much calmer, and you will love others, you will have a positive attitude with life, with others, around everyone. You will no longer be rejecting your life, your environment, your loved ones, your friends, your traits, because you will be aligned, and that will feel good. And once you get there, it ends. The suffering, the solitude, it all ends, because there is no longer a purpose it's serving in your life. When you've learned all of the lessons, you no longer, when you could face and experience a very negative, terrorizing experience, but you will no longer feel bad. You'll not try to control it, you'll just surrender to it, and it's flowing right through you. You won't be antagonized by it, you won't feel the need to hate it and hate your life for it and despise reality and be resentful and anxious and fearful, because it's part of the plan, it's part of the process. When that's you, why would you ever have to experience an experience of suffering? Why would you ever have to go through solitude or suffering when it offers you nothing to learn, when it adds nothing to you, it takes nothing from you, it's just another day? Then it will no longer come to you. You will no longer attract them for the lessons that lead you to your grand intention. Thank you so much, you lovely infinite beings, for tuning in to another video by AfsConsciousFrequency. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel, because it helps me so much and it helps this video find its way to many more others who might actually need it.